And we are back on the chosen journey with the guy on the back of that jersey and the guy on the shirt. When they stop him for a ticket, he always says, "You know who I am, Mr. Steve Karsay." Steve, welcome back.
Hey Jonathan, how we doing?
I am so freaking awesome because we are in the hotbed of baseball talk right now. People, it's not NFL playoff season yet, and people are starting to get burnt out from there. And basketball is still early on, hockey's still on, and people are talking nonstop on the radio and TV on all sorts of baseball talk. I love this time of year; it's the best.
Yeah, once the hot stove starts and some of the rumors start flying around and you start seeing some trades being made because arbitration eligible players do not want to get tendered, or you see the non-tenders and more free agents hit the market, it gives some teams a little bit more choices in what they want to do and how they want to, develop their roster for 2023. So it's always an exciting part. To see how early teams will start spending money and start adding players via the trade or an early free agent signing, which usually doesn't happen. But Tyler Anderson did that with the Anaheim Angels, the Los Angeles Angels, I should say, on a 3-year, $39 million deal to add some pitching.
Are they still the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or are they just the Los Angeles Angels?
They're a combination of a few different things.
I miss the California Angels. I think that was the best name, the best logo. I would have stayed with that, have the whole state of California. But hey, there's smarter people than me above my pay grade that decide that apparently in that organization. So today's chapter 34, is actually called MLB Hot Stove Talk and Hall of Fame Talk. So very good. We are going to be talking hot stove. But before we get there, Steve, there's a pressing issue in baseball right now that when TMZ picks it up, we have no choice but to talk about it. Here, you're based in Arizona, I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we had a guy by the name of Marcus Stroman who was a little bit outspoken. He's since departed and spread his words of wisdom in New York and Chicago and wherever he goes. So there's a guy who feels like he's got to pick up the slack in this. He's like, I got to be the outspoken guy. I got to tell it like it is. And that is, of course, Alek Manoah. And Alek Manoah was on Serge Ibaka's podcast, and rather than drink cricket juice, they challenged him to name the biggest cheater in baseball history, and he named Gerrit Cole. Now, I think this has been spoken to death, Steve, but I'm going to ask you a question firstly, as far as from a management point of view, ownership point of view. When they hear talk like this, you think in the Blue Jays organization, do you think they're like, good for you, Alek, stirring the pot a bit with this rivalry? They're like, I wish he wouldn't go there.
Probably wish you wouldn't go there. I understand, the things that go on in baseball today, and it's a new era, and they do these interviews and they add these little twists to them. But I mean, you got to maybe understand the game a little bit. I'm not sure how far back he was thinking, if it was just a blanket question of who's the biggest cheater in the game and things like that. But the history of the game proves a few things, and it's all speculative sometimes. There's always courts and things involved with what that is, but he's probably going from recent memory on what he thinks, and whether that's true or not, that's subjective, and will be left on the public and the people's perception to see who that is. But if that's who he thinks is the biggest cheater of all time, then he has the right to his opinion, and he can speak, the words uh, out of his mouth. But he's got to understand that there are probably going to be some consequences. Maybe not personally on him, but the team when they do face the Yankees and they face Gerrit Cole, and it's just bullet board material that in division rivals have, and it's a tough thing to overcome sometimes.
The question actually was worst cheater in baseball history. So that's a pretty big statement. And Manoah said he used a lot of sticky stuff to make his pitches better, and he kind of got called out on it. I've been around the game enough to say there's been enough guys that have used sticky stuff on all sorts of capacities, on their bats, on their hands, on their gloves. And as far as baseball's been around, there's always been a form of cheating, even if you consider popping greenies back in the day, to give you that extra boost. But I don't know what it is. I'm kind of, for myself, on a personal standpoint, as a commentator of the game, I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of hearing about the Astros cheating. I'm glad that they won this year. Dusty Baker, getting his championship. But like, let's just finish it off. And I think we will not get past all of this, Steve, until all those guys on the ballot that we consider quote unquote cheaters or suspected cheaters, until they're finished and gone away, and then we could start a new era, maybe a cleaner era. But I think anybody who thinks that this was only in a little pocket of time and there was no cheating otherwise before or after, I think are sorely mistaken, in my opinion.
Very true, and I'm sure Gerrit Cole was the only one using sticky stuff.
Right.
So anybody who used a piece of sticky stuff is the biggest cheater of all time. So I don't know. I mean, again, that's not my place to say, not your place to say, or Manoah's place to say. Leave that up to public opinion. And if people think they're cheaters, then they're cheaters. If they, are like what it is what it is, then so be it.
You think Gerrit Cole's losing any sleep after hearing this?
Probably not.
I think he has hundreds of $1 millions packed in his pillowcase as he falls asleep at night. So I think he's doing okay. The one thing I want to actually forward to the Hall of Fame talk a little bit because it's a good segue, but I didn't realize I'd read it before, forgot about it because we have the new batch of possible inductees, the new candidates. But on the same token, the National Baseball Hall of Fame announced that there's 8 players who are getting considered under the ERA Committee, which used to be called the Veterans Committee. Interesting list. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Curt Schilling, Albert Bell, Don Mattingly, Fred McGriff, Dale Murphy, Rafael Palmeiro. Now, we know which way we're going to segment these guys. It's like the who's who of clean versus cheating, I would say. The guys that I'm really focusing on, like I love Mattingly, and you and I have talked off air about Mattingly as far as, what he brought to the table as a player, career cut short as far as injuries go. I think we can agree that he was great, very good, but probably not up to the standards of what the Hall of Fame will see just because his career got short from those injuries. The 2 guys I'm really focused on, if you cut away the guys who would be automatic, if not for the clouds hanging over their heads, are Fred McGriff and Dale Murphy. And in reality, I don't know how these guys are not in the Hall of Fame. You look at their numbers, you analyze them to death. If these guys played in larger markets, if these guys were Yankees, they would be in there automatic. I know McGriff did play, I believe, in for a short segment on the Yanks, but just guys who were very quiet, went about their business, not flashy, consistent, but maybe lost a little bit because the sizzle wasn't there. What do you think?
I don't know their overall numbers on how they would calculate to today's formulas and what they do, because that's kind of how they do it. These guys go back and they look at the numbers that these guys 20, 30 years ago put up, and then they kind of compute them into what the numbers would use today. But both of them had very good numbers. Both of them had long careers. Both of them were great for periods over their career. I know Fred McGriff, I don't know if I'm going to hit this number exact. It was either 492 homers or 496 homers, something right around there. I mean, just because you don't hit the 500 mark doesn't mean anything, in my opinion. I mean, he's put together a solid, career that, obviously enables him to get in front of the committee to get a chance to get into Hall of Fame. But you're right. I'm not sure that if you would go back 10 years or 5 years when the new numbers came out and computed, that he would have been in the Hall of Fame, earlier on in the ballot than right now.
Yeah, but guys that were just classy, good for the game, like the Andre Dawson type guys, just when you picture class in baseball, I would say they've definitely fit it. Where the other guys go, I don't know. the only guy I would say looking at that list, I'm going to knock Albert Bell out of there. I don't see him going to Hall of Fame on any level. He was a great player for a segment, but I think that there's too much holding him back. Kurt Schilling, I think for everything he did, especially his playoff performances, I think if he kept a little bit more quiet and was a little bit politically correct, not even a lot politically correct, but a little bit, I think that might have helped his cause. But I think being outspoken on everything else in life, I think that ultimately is going to hold him back as well. That's just my personal feeling on it.
Well, it's not the political Hall of Fame, right? It's the baseball Hall of Fame. At the end of the day, his political side should not matter whether or not you get a vote or you don't get a vote if you have the numbers that will allow you to get into a prestigious place because of your performance. It's baseball performance. That's why it's called the Baseball Hall of Fame. And if his numbers are good enough and quality enough, he should be in the Hall of Fame. If they're not, then that's understandable as well. So at the end of the day, I would just hope that people would take the political forum completely out of it and just determine on his baseball numbers whether he's good enough to be in Cooperstown or not.
I agree 1,000% with that. Take a look at Ty Cobb, take a look at Kirby Puckett. Not the greatest human beings on the planet, but they were in there and they were there for baseball merit. And I wish people could close their eyes to that. But unfortunately, we live in a society that I think get very in love with the idea of the overall image, so to speak. And I think writers take that into their account, obviously. Even something along this person was good with the media, not good with the media. A guy like Jack Morris, during his playing days, not the most huggy feely guy on the planet, but once he retired and actually went into broadcasting himself, people saw him in a different light. Jeff Kent, same thing. I don't know how Jeff Kent is not in the Hall of Fame. He's got his one last kick at the can. I think that he'll get in there, but maybe not. If not, I think the era committee will definitely get him in there. We're left with two other segments. We have the new breed coming in. And when I look in the class year after year, the first thing I look at the list, I think to myself, is there a first balloter here? I can't see this happening on this list at all. You got Carlos Beltran, R.A. Dickey, K-Rod, Jacoby Ellsbury, Houston Street, John Lackey, Bronson Arroyo, Matt Cain, Jason Worth, Mike Napoli, Jared Weaver, JJ Hardy, Johnny Peralta, and Andre Ethier. What these people all have in common is they were on my fantasy baseball teams at one point or another and all helped me but killed my teams. But I see very good players, all had very good seasons. I don't see a first ballot here at all. I think Beltran is the one that's probably going to be hanging on right till the end. Maybe he'll get in there. I think his playoff success definitely helps him there, but I don't see a clear first balloter here just because it is so hard to get into this Hall of Fame compared to all the other sports.
I completely agree. I mean, I think they're all of those names that you named are really good players in the era that they played, which is my era. I played against a lot of them, and they're are high end numbers that those guys put up. But um, this is just my opinion. But you have to be great for a 10-year span, in my opinion, to get into the Hall of Fame. And when you look at these guys' numbers, were they great for 10 years in the big leagues and dominated their position year in and year out? And I just I don't look at that list and see anybody's name on that list that has that criteria.
From the holdover group, when I take a look, see, that's a list of very, very good to excellent. And I could see a case for almost all these guys at some point getting in there, except for, of course, the quote unquote steroid era, and otherwise determining were they good enough. Scott Rowland, Todd Helton, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Gary Sheffield, Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, Jeff Kent, Andy Pettit. Those are all in some point or another Hall of Famers for most of us. There's debate about Billy Wagner and closers get in, not get in. I was kind of on the fence with him, but when the arguments are there are closers that are inferior to him that are already in there, that cements the vote for me. Andy Pettit, watching him, how do you not say this guy's a Hall of Famer? I can't see that. Todd Helton, Colorado, not Colorado. You look at the numbers. To me, he's a Hall of Famer. I think it's pretty clear cut. My vote would be going for those guys at the very least.
Yeah, we've talked about this so many times, right? How difficult it is to be the top one or top half percent in the game that you play to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Um, as great as those players are, I mean, it's really, really difficult to put people in. When I watch the Cooperstown summer speeches all the time, there's only usually one, two, maybe three guys that talk at that. So to have a full list of like five or six that anybody thinks is going to get in, it's not going to happen. It is just too hard, and your numbers need to speak for themselves. So, you know, that list, the second list that you put out, is a tremendous list. Listen, there's some great players with some great numbers on that list. Now, how do those numbers stack up to, uh, you know, the positions that the players are already in the Hall of Fame and over the course of, a 10-year span? Are you one of the greatest players in a 10-year span on that list? The one that stands out to me is the Andy Pettit. But then you got to go back and look at each individual number and break that down and see how that compares to a lot of other pitchers, because there can be, you know, a lot less wiggle room for hitters as for pitchers, because there's so many stats for pitching, whether you have playoff wins, you take regular season wins, teams you've played on, things like that.
I actually sat one afternoon on a Sunday and I watched a 1 hour documentary on Andrew Jones. I've watched Andrew Jones, always been fascinated with Andrew Jones. Never wanted him on my fantasy baseball team. Don't ask me why, but just the teams he was on, and you look at his stats. If you take his 10 best seasons, he's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it. Where the documentary claims, and I thought about it, and I went back and looked at the stats. I would say they're not far off. Is sometimes you went hanging on too long, and Andrew had a sharp drop off, and sharp drop off for enough years that you go back and say that's what sticks out in my mind now, not all those great seasons. And it's a shame because it's almost like being penalized for still trying. Those other great stats never went away, but if he had left sooner, they argued that he would probably be in the Hall of Fame, and I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, if you're a 300 to a 310 hitter and you hang on for 4 or 5 more years and you don't put those quality numbers up, now that 310 drops into the 280s, and you become a 280 career hitter instead of a 305 career hitter, it makes a big difference when people are voting. So, I never really looked at it like that, but it's a really good point. You wouldn't want him on your fantasy team, but I would want him in center field when I'm playing, when I'm pitching.
Absolutely. Another guy I watched another documentary was Dave Parker, and we've talked about him before. And people know him as the DH and the sweet swinger, and doing the shuffle when he does his home runs. But he was a five-tool player back in his heyday, and he's another guy that if he had hung out around a little less, plus didn't have a little bit of clouding around him politically wise, this guy was a Hall of Famer. Like he was the best player in baseball in one stretch, and it's such a shame that people didn't get to see guys from this era. They forget all this. It's a shame. And good on Pittsburgh. They still put shirts and jerseys of Dave out there. And I encourage all the MLB teams, especially ones that have a long history. I love, going back to your Hall of Famers, going back to your heyday players. Put that merchandise out there. They get the younger fans buying that merchandise, researching these players when they're alive, bringing them out, honoring them, and remembering the legacy of because otherwise, if you don't bring them out, people won't remember, and it's a shame.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, this is an interesting conversation that we can always go back and forth on. But I have a question for you now. It popped up into. I'm tired of you asking me all the questions. Now I'm about to pop one over to you on this conversation that we had. Okay, so just it ran through my mind as you were talking about this documentary that you were watching about Andrew Jones. Excuse me, and the sharp drop off that he may had. So, would you, as a player, not Andrew Jones, not anybody in particular, this is directed strictly at you, if you were a major league player, if you played 13 to 14 seasons and had Hall of Fame numbers, but wanted to play more for 4 or 5 more seasons, but were able to make 30 to 35 more $1 million, would you play those 35? Would you take those $35 million for the 4 or 5 more years and become a non Hall of Fame caliber player because your numbers drop off, or would you stick with the 13 years career with the Hall of Fame numbers and possibly get into the Hall of Fame?
Such an easy answer for me, no doubt about it. And I'm going to work my way backwards to explain my logic. Anybody who's ever known me, talked to me, may have an ability to decide my future in general. I tell them, as long as there's 1% life left in my body, you are to leave me alive as long as you can. I will find a way back. Do not pull the plug on me ever. I want to stay alive. I want to hustle. So that being said, if I'm playing competitive sports, I am staying in as long as they will allow me. I do not care. I don't even care if I'm being paid $1 at that point. If I have the ability to go on the field and compete, I'm doing it. I'm going with the hopes that I'm going to try my best, and maybe I'll actually be able to bring up those stats. If I got to be a pinch runner, if I got to be a defensive replacement, I'm doing whatever is necessary to get on that field until you got to cart me off. I don't care if there's somebody younger, better than me. If I feel this competitive spirit and I can be there, I will. At the point that I'm absolutely embarrassing myself, if I absolutely have no ability whatsoever, or I simply know I cannot compete, and I literally feel embarrassed, but I have the opportunity to go to Korea, I have the opportunity to go to Japan, Mexico, and play competitively there, then I will do that as long as I can still play. That's how I feel about it. If I was gonna get paid, like there was that Seattle catcher Kenji Jojima, and
Mm-hmm.
he said, I'm at the point that I'm embarrassing myself and I don't feel I'm playing at the level. He forgoed, I think, 2 years, 20 million or something like that. And he went back to Japan. I would do the same thing. I would leave. But if I felt that I'm earning my paycheck or semi earning my paycheck, I would keep going.
This is a more of a Hall of Fame decision than it is a paycheck decision.
I could care less about the Hall of Fame part of it, simply because I know that regardless of what I'm going to do, somebody's going to like me or hate me, and I have no say in it regardless. So I would have zero consideration for the Hall of Fame in my decision of continuing to play. Period.
Fair.
And listen, you left on your terms, right? You could have
I
found a
did.
way, right? With the arm still hanging off on a thread, you still could have gone. You could have still earned a paycheck, and you said, I'm done," right?
That very true statement. I did. At that point, my arm was hurting. I wasn't feeling like I was competing up to the level of performance that I expected from myself, and I just felt like it was time to go home at that particular time in 2006, and that's what I did.
And I've always valued, when somebody makes a decision to walk away from, this is called the chosen journey, because there are people that outside of sports in life, whether it's changing jobs, changing homes, changing addresses as far as what country or city you live in, when you make the decision that this is the best thing for me, my family, and you do it and you don't look back, that's the best feeling. When you second guess yourself and you're like, what if I done that? What if I done this? Maybe I made a mistake. That's not a good feeling at all. And that's where I tell people, and anything you do in life, there's never a guarantee. Nobody can come and tell you this is the 100% the best decision in the world. You factor in all the things you can, and you say, I'm going with this and I'm going to live with this, knowing the repercussions of it. Like all those people, I sold my Apple stock too early and I could have been a gajillionaire. Well, you made a decision at the time that made the best thing. But to live in regret in the past is not going to solve anything. Hopefully, then you learn from your past decisions and you can make better decisions in the future. That's the best I can say on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's all intertwined, right? I mean, whether it's baseball or life decisions, I think we all have to make a decision that's what's best for us personally and for our families, and live with what decision that we do make and move on. So there it goes again, intertwined, not only the baseball portion of it, but some life lessons also thrown in.
As we're taping this chapter today, it's the American Thanksgiving coming up. We're in the third week of November, so happy early Thanksgiving to you, Steve. We've
Thank
already
you.
celebrated ours. I got my birthday coming up, turning 46 and going strong. So again, it's a great time of year, and that's when I know birthday's coming up. That means hot stove talk. Now, a lot of the names I'm looking at as we're summing up today's chapter, because we don't have a lot to report right now, because a lot of these guys are probably not going to be signing off until the winter meetings. Hopefully, most of them will get their big paydays before Christmas so they can have their early Christmas gifts. The first guy on the list, Aaron Judge, said, I'm not going to bid on my home run ball. because it's outside of my pay bracket right now until I sign my contract. BS. Aaron, you can spend the 3-5 million if you really wanted to. You do not want to spend 3-5 million on your baseball, which I think is a smart move by you. But you got Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom, Brandon Nimmo, Carlos Rodon, Carlos Correa, and Trey Turner. Those are the main names that have been thrown around. Everybody's speculating. Everybody's trying to segment them of where they're going. The truth is, until they sign, nobody knows. Period.
Very true. I mean, there's going to be a lot of talk and a lot of rumors flying around. I mean, I think out of that group, the Bellinger one's really interesting to me. The Dodgers have looked at his numbers over the last 2 years, and they haven't been very good. He's been very close to the bottom in production and didn't want to pay him the 18 million that they were going to have to pay him in arbitration. So they non-tendered him and cut him loose. So in my opinion, he's going to get a 1-year deal somewhere. I'm not sure what that dollar value is going to be. I'm not sure what team is going to step forward and take a chance with that type of dollars on a payroll when he's been non-productive for over the course of 2 seasons.
I can tell you who's going to be stuck watching him next season. It's going to be because he's coming to Toronto. You can pretty much book that. He's going to get a 2-year deal, 9 million per season with an opt out after the first year, and going to rebuild his value. I'm okay with at 9 million. I'm very okay with taking a flyer on him because of what could be. Apparently, it was a celebration again with those celebrations in the postseason. He popped his shoulder, and that's what caused all this. Steve, we got to stop celebrating these playoff victories. It's not helping anybody. Like, they got to hey, congrats, hey, you know. Imagine,
They can celebrate. They can celebrate. Just don't do anything that is going to hurt yourself. Like, it's okay to celebrate, but at the end of the day, make sure that it's not anything ridiculously crazy that can put your health in jeopardy.
Well, Yankees fans apparently are driving to the hospitals in droves because of the news that Aaron Judge is meeting with representatives in San Francisco, and people are reading a lot into that. I don't know if we're ever going to know until he actually signs. I still think he's staying in New York. I think Yankees fans can sleep easy on this one. And if he doesn't, the hot stove is saying that the Yankees are making a pitch for Shohei Ohtani. Oh my Lord, it does not end. They're they're checking deGrom's medical records. The Yankees are on everybody apparently, but these Yankees are not your grandpa's Yankees. They are not taking every single free agent. They are not dumb. They are finding that middle of the road guys that may have upside potential. They're not signing 5 guys at 40 million per season. It's just not going to happen. There's not unlimited money. They're not going to have a $1 billion payroll.
That's true. I mean, with all the luxury tax thresholds and things like that that have been put in there, and they've been upped a little bit with the new collective bargaining agreement that they came to last year. But you're right. I mean, I think all teams are getting smarter with the dollars that they're spending in the offseason. I think that their analytical platforms are giving them players that will give them a couple wins above replacement as opposed to a guy, like a Judge who's a 9 or a 10, right? I mean, he's one of the special ones that commands that type of dollars for any team. But you got to remember, he grew up in California, right? He grew up right there, and to play close to home might be something that really pulls his strings.
And the other argument, again, we said on a previous episode, but if he was to sign that monster deal in New York, chances are the ending of that contract will not go very well. And does he really want to play in New York as a hated guy versus leaving on top? He's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't at that point, unless he literally signs 1 or 2 year deals at a time, which he ain't going to do. If he gets 7 years, 9 years, 10 years, he's taking it. The guy who scares the bejeebers out of me is deGrom. And if I have a choice, I'm taking Verlander at a shorter contract than deGrom if I had that option. But that's me.
Well, I don't think Verlander is going to be any cheaper than deGrom.
No.
They're 3-year difference. That Verlander's 40, deGrom's 37. Obviously Verlander just had Tommy John 2 years ago, and the Verlander had Tommy John. deGrom has been injured on and off here, the last couple of years. So, it would be a team stepping out of the box for either one of those guys to put a $43 million salary on like what Scherzer owned, because that's the elite of the elite, even though a little bit older. And that'll be a very interesting watch as we get into the offseason.
There's a lot of talk of Nimmo, and simply because there's not a lot of center fielders out there. I'm not loving him at 5 years, 100 million plus personally. I was shocked to see that on Philadelphia, Castellanos got 100 mil. I didn't recall that. I thought he got maybe 30, 40, 50 mil. So their agents are doing their jobs out there. The guy who gets less talk about him, but I would say if I have to go for my sure bet, it's Trey Turner. I think he's just steady in the field, steady at the plate. If you're going to open up the purse strings for anybody, I would take Trey Turner. I think he's the safest bet out of everybody, and he doesn't get enough of that publicity simply because he was in Washington for so long. I don't know where he's headed. And same thing with Carlos Correa. He'd be my number 2 guy. It's talk Correa is going to go back to Minnesota. And that'd be a good thing. It's not a bad thing, for smaller market teams to keep their guys, so to speak. But man, these numbers, we're talking about 25 to 40 mil a year. It's getting harder and harder for most teams to compete.
Yeah, it's definitely getting harder for the smaller market teams to bring in the elite superstars of the game. And obviously that's the disparage between big market and little market is little market has to do a little bit more work. As far as a big market can just say, hey, here's a couple guys that we want. Let's just shred our payroll to where we can get it and afford these guys per year. And then we'll work around that as we move into the future. So I guess that's the way of the world. I mean, you have your IBMs and your Microsofts and all of that. And then you have a couple low end computer companies that just can't compete with the big ones. And that's kind of where we are in baseball is, the revenues from fans, the revenues from TV go to the bigger market teams because there's more people watching them, and the smaller market teams get a little bit more beat up, and they have to work a little bit harder to find the diamonds in the rough, even though all of the teams have analytical platforms that can survey all of the numbers that teams look for production.
And I'll sum this one up, Steve, as far as the talk that I've read from the analytics point of view. And that's if you look at the amount of players 30 years plus and they get contracts in free agency of 5 years plus, so few of those contracts ever work out for the life of the contract. It might be good for half the life of the contract, if that, but especially when you get into past the 5 year market, those 8 to 10 year contracts. And if you don't have the opt outs, it usually does not end very well for the teams. And they know this and they're still doing it because their fans will be very upset with them if they don't sign these players.
It is very true. I mean, the long length of contracts usually come back to bite teams in the very end, but they still do it. Why? Because they're making money. They want to make the fans happy, and they wouldn't give out these contracts if they weren't producing the revenues that they're producing over the course of years.
And if you talk about it's not fair and the owners are making so much money, etc. Remember that in baseball, they're guaranteed contracts versus the NFL, where most of the contracts are not. And the players still getting these opt-outs, which blows my mind. And very few teams get opt-outs. Imagine if teams got the opt-out features, how they'd be on it in a second. So just remember at the end of the day, it goes both ways. So I think both sides are doing pretty well on it.
I would agree. I think the game is healthy. It's getting healthier now that the collective bargaining agreement was settled last year for another 5 or 6 years, maybe 7. But it's they're on calm waters right now, and this is a good off season to see what happens.
And this would be a great time for us to pause. And we're going to come back next week. And for the next couple of weeks, Steve, we have to go through it. We have our MLB award winners. Was announced a few weeks back. We didn't touch upon it. I think it's time to dissect each of the league's CR award winners and how we liked each of the victories in the respective positions. So we'll be back with the American League next week. Until then, enjoy the week, and thank you as always for your commentary.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again. As always, this is great. I love the conversations that we have on a weekly basis about the game and about life. So great to be here. Going to enjoy Thanksgiving, and we'll go on from there.
And You threw me a good looper there. Keep those questions coming, Steve. Let's see if you stop me one of these weeks.
Absolutely.
Cheers.